You may be wondering how mental health well-being has anything to do with science. So we have a series of mini presentations that gives information in brief snippets. The first presentation will include information about trauma and how it rewires the brain. We call that neuroscience. We next talk about how our experiences are expressed in our genetic makeup by our history and how toxic stress may revise the genetic code of our DNA. We call that the science of epigenetics. Then we delve into the social sciences. We learn that what is predictable is preventable. That's good news for us. So we give some general guidance of what to look for with a mental health challenge. Basically, what is typical and non-typical adolescent behavior? Then we give some tips on how to start a conversation with a young person. We call this section the ACE. Lastly, we look at the science of how to build hope with facts, and we call this part resiliency. So you can hang out here to learn more about the science of youth. We're also going to see some county data on the mental health well-being of youth in Livingston County. So let's begin. Let's hear from Mary White. She is from CASA-Trinity.
Hey there. As Tracy said, my name is Mary White, and I'm here to talk about trauma and parenting. So let's first define trauma. You know that it's a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. It's something that it could be abuse, it could be violence, it could be witnessing of violence, but it also could include a seemingly small, humiliating event that our child is having trouble getting past. So if they have a traumatic experience, or you have a traumatic experience and you're able to move past it, that's okay, right? So, you remember that it was traumatic, it was hard, but you moved past it. Where it gets tricky is when it continues to sort of plague us or haunt us, or haunt our children. That's when it gets more tricky. So the idea that our child might have had trauma can be pretty overwhelming, can be pretty awful for us as parents. It can be triggering. Maybe we had trauma as a child, and so we thought that maybe we could protect our child from, that they would never ever have it, which certainly is a good impulse, but not necessarily, realistic. Yes, you can protect your children from trauma, but sometimes it happens anyway. And so that can be pretty triggering for us as parents, that someone that we love, that we have vowed to protect, gets hurt, and they're struggling with it, or they're having mental health issues over it. That can feel pretty awful as a parent, and sometimes we even get in denial over it because we don't want to face it, not because we don't love them, but because we're scared, and it's just really hard to face as a parent that our child is hurting. That's really tricky, but the only way that we're going to help them through it is to face it and to open our mind to the possibility of it. And so the more open we are to the fact that something can happen to one of our children, no matter how hard we try, the more likely they are that we're going to recognize it, but also that they might come to us about it. And so we want to keep our minds open to that possibility. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for reactions that don't match the situation. So an overreaction to something that's pretty tiny, or an underreaction to something that's pretty big. So maybe they've numbed up, and it's a pretty big situation, and they're really not feeling anything about it. It's not that either of those reactions are wrong, but they're a red flag that maybe they've experienced some trauma. Now, maybe they haven't. I think it's important that we look for a pattern of over or under reactions, not just an isolated event. So if they have one meltdown, that does not mean that they've been traumatized. But if it's an ongoing pattern, then I think we have to open our mind to the possibility. Again, doesn't mean they have been, but we have to keep our minds open to it if we're going to help them successfully. We can also look for regressive behavior. So maybe they're thumb sucking again. Maybe they're wetting the bed. Maybe they're acting very sort of young, like really, really young. And we're like, what? That can be, doesn't mean it is, but it can be a sign of trauma. And so something to keep our minds open to. And again, we have to, when we keep our mind open to it, remember that what is traumatic for me is very different than what is traumatic for you or for them. Something that we might see as tiny and silly might have been very humiliating for them, and they may not be able to get to sort of become unstuck from it. So we have to respect each other's trauma. If I say I've been through a traumatic event, please believe me. And same with our children. We might not understand it. That's okay. But we need to respect it and to take it seriously, please. So saying that your child has had trauma or is having mental health issues doesn't mean that they get a pass from doing what your family expects. It just means that you're going to understand and support. Okay, and I'm sure you do anyway. I'm sure you understand and support your children as much as possible. We all do. But in this case, we're going to kind of make sure that we're clear with them that we're on their side through this. So for an example, let's say they're getting very anxious about school and they don't want to go to school. Of course, as a family, we tell them they have to go to school. So we're not going to stop that rule for them, but we're going to join them in it. We're going to say, listen, I get it. Going to school is hard. It can be really scary. I'm with you. I'm going to go out the door with you. We're going to talk in the car. Maybe we'll do some deep breathing. I'm with you. And so we're going to join them in their fear and coach them through it. Let them know that maybe we've had hard times like that where getting out the door was hard. So what can you do? If you suspect that something is going on with a child, make sure that you're okay before you talk to them. You don't want to come to them rushed, hungry, tired, where you're not going to listen really well. So you're going to want to make sure you have plenty of space and time to talk to them and that you're okay in that moment, that you've gotten yourself to an emotionally regulated space so that you can listen to them really, really well. You're going to be curious. You're going to ask them gently what's going on. And if they tell you a little bit, if they'll let you, maybe ask them a few follow-up questions, because children typically tell us the tip of the iceberg. They don't tell us everything in the first go-around. So they might just say, well, he did something weird. And so you're going to want to follow up gently, trying not to panic. You're going to try and follow up with them and ask some more questions. If they're resistant, that's okay. You don't have to persist. It's not an investigation. It's not an interrogation. You're just going to let them know, okay, well, maybe we can talk about this again another time. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. Let them know that you love them no matter what. If somebody else made a mistake, if they made a mistake, even if it was a really big mistake, that you're going to be with them through it and that you're going to love them no matter what. You're not going to be disappointed in them. You're going to help them. And could there be consequences because of it? Yep, there might be, but you're going to be with them with it, through it. You're going to look for opportunities ahead of time, like, as much as possible, for when people say things about people who have trauma or who have mental health issues, or your child says something about it, like someone who kills themselves is a coward, or people who have mental health issues are just trying to get attention. Try to do some education in the moment. Say to them, because they're probably asking you what you think, even though they're not directly asking you by saying those things in front of you, they're looking for your feelings about it. And so if you can say to them, I don't think that. I think people who are suicidal are hurting and they need help, and we got to do whatever we can to help them. Or I don't think they're looking to get attention. I think they're looking to get their needs met. And I'll help, if someone is having a mental health crisis, I'll do what I can to get them the help that they need, including you. I would do that for you because you're my child and I love you. So trying to educate them, when they say things like that or people say things like that around them, trying to give them your insight onto it. Being proactive. Regularly and often as possible, even if they're rolling their eyes, even if you've said this and they think you're stupid, let them know that there's nothing that they do or can go through that you're not going to be with them there for. I don't know if that sentence made sense, but I think you get what I mean. They need to know that if they've made a huge mistake, in their mind, a huge mistake, that you're going to still be with them and that you're going to help them figure it out. And again, there could be consequences. There could be things that you've done that you need to do differently, that maybe a therapist says to you, listen, Mom, you've got to try doing this a different way. That you guys can get through anything together. You can't control everything, but you'll be with them no matter what. I think that's just so important that we tell kids ahead of time that that's true before they're in the crisis, so that they know that they can come to us. And I think, letting them know that they can go to somebody else, that you just want them to go to a trusted adult if they're struggling with anything, but that you're going to be there for them no matter what. If you're having a hard time talking to them, try taking a drive with just the two of you. For some weird reason, kids talk better in the car. I don't know why. I think it's the lack of eye contact, but I think they tend to open up more in the car. So give that a try. All right. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tracy. I am with CASA-Trinity. The next slide shows mental health data of Livingston County youth. This survey was collected in every school district in our county, including Avon Central School District. The information on the next slide is a snapshot of 1 year. However, the information gathered is a bit concerning for stakeholders concerned about the well-being of our youth. The data that is presented here was collected in 2022. According to this information that measures mental well-being among our youth, approximately 1 in 3 of our youth may experience a mental health challenge. In order to put this in perspective, the national average is 1 in 5. Although we do not have a long history of asking these questions from our youth, nor is this a complete mental health survey, the snapshot tells us that we may be able to provide resources and guidance to our parents and caregivers in the event their young person experiences a mental health challenge. The information that is presented today are tips and guidelines for parents and caregivers. Neuroscience. Neuroscience is simply the study of the brain. Of course, our knowledge of what the brain can do is mostly unknown. The things that we do know, however, are impactful and meaningful. So let's discover what we know. Here are some things that we know about the brain. There are periods of development in the brain that are critical. Adolescents are learning how to become an adult. When unexpected events happen, like war, the pandemic, or violence, or when an event happens over a long period of time, like divorce, homelessness, economic instability, the brain adapts. And young people, when they are exposed to these things, are vulnerable between the ages of 10 and 17 years old. Adaptations may be influenced by resiliency skills and support. As adults, we have an influence on how a child handles everyday stressors and trauma. Our conversations with young people make a difference. We know that brain development ends around 25 years old. Now you'll notice that asterisk at the end. That's because there might be scientific evidence that the brain may continue to develop later than 25 years old. What fires together, wires together. It's a simple concept. Basically, what it means is that when we learn, our learning creates efficient pathways that are critical for our survival. Lastly, we know a healthy brain is not free from toxic stress. A healthy brain is adaptable. It's adaptable by supportive relationships and resiliency skills, and those things go a long way toward developing a healthy brain. Now, let's talk about epigenetics. This is a relatively new science. It studies how our experiences, both personal and generational, can influence how genetic material is read. Toxic stress may change the protective barrier around a gene and cause the gene to express in a different manner because how we adapt is important for survival. Not only does epigenetics study maladaptive behaviors like substance misuse across generations or generational poverty, but epigenetics can also study how protective factors like resiliency skills may be transferred across generations. Let's prime our brain to reflect on what we know thus far. As seen from a previous slide, we know, and now we also know through epigenetics, changes in gene expression may be due to toxic stress. So, given all we know thus far, is it possible that the rebellious nature of a young person you know may be rooted in underlying adversities? We're going to talk next about the ACE. The next section, we are going to talk about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs refers to traumatic events during childhood that can have a long-term negative effect on physical and mental health. The ACE survey is a simple survey that asks participants about a traumatic experience across 3 domains: household dysfunction, neglect, and abuse. The survey is designed to be a communication tool. This communication tool is designed to develop empathy, healing, and to promote resiliency. When someone experiences early trauma and stress, they adapt. They adapt for survival. The adaptations are predictable patterns of development. Adaptations from trauma and long-term toxic stress may look like academic failure, early substance use or abuse, behavioral challenges, expulsions, suspensions. What we know is that many of these adaptations from toxic stress are treatable and preventable. Since the adaptations are preventable, there are things parents and caregivers can do to help a child through traumatic or mental health challenges. Many of these things Mary talked about earlier in her tips for parents. We will review those points, but first, you may be wondering, what is typical adolescent behavior and what behaviors indicate when a young person may need some help? Let's find out. This is not a complete list. It's a general guideline and a reminder that sometimes adolescent behavior can be confusing. So I am going to read the chart from left to right. So starting with mood swings due to hormonal changes and emotional development. That is typical adolescent behavior. What is not typical adolescent behavior is rapid and extreme mood changes that persist. These things could be a sign of an emotional struggle. Another typical adolescent behavior is withdrawing from family to spend more time with friends. A warning sign would be withdrawing from friends, family, and social activities. Another sign of typical adolescent behavior is moving from childhood likes to teen pursuits. A potential warning sign: losing interest in favorite activities and not replacing them with other pursuits. Another sign of typical adolescent behavior is sometimes struggling to complete undesired risks. A potential warning sign could be difficulty with focus and concentration across a wide variety of tasks and settings. So now you have a general idea of what warning signs might look like. So, what do you do about it? A great question. We know that adult conversations are helpful to young people. Sometimes, as adults, we're just not sure on how to start the conversation. There can be a lot of reasons why we might hesitate to begin a conversation. Sometimes we think if we talk about an issue, it will make the problem worse. While all of those are legitimate fears, research and data tell us that talking about it is actually helpful to a young person. During the next few slides, we're going to review on how to approach and listen to a young person. Before we even approach a young person, we need to assess. So, assess. Think of it like driving a car. You're taking in the complete picture of what might be going on with your young person and with yourself. Assessing is constant and it requires your full attention. So, when talking to a young person about their behaviors, remember to assess your own well being as well. Ask yourself, am I in a place where I can view the situation clearly? If not, enlist help. Ask yourself, do I have time? Am I tired? Am I upset? Also, ask yourself if the situation seems safe for you and for the young person. Remember, as the conversation goes, assessment is continuous. It is okay to stop the conversation if needed. All right, let's approach the young person. So, we want to plan to talk privately about your concerns at a mutually convenient time that is free from distractions. We want to be aware that a young person may not open up to us until they are sure that we care. Be patient. A young person may downplay what they are going through in order to avoid upsetting you. Regardless, let the young person know that you are available when they are ready. Do not put pressure on them to talk right away. Lastly, use I statements. I have noticed. I am concerned. Let's practice by identifying the helpful and unhelpful sentences in the next slide. So read this slide. What are the helpful and unhelpful sentences? Are there phrases that you have heard from others that make you cringe? Are there phrases that you have used that make you cringe? As a parent or a caregiver, we are not required to be perfect. When you reflect on your conversation with a young person and you realize that maybe your approach was not helpful, circle back to the young person and start again. Young people are very forgiving. Now, the next step can be a challenge for many of us. As a concerned adult, it is important to listen. Listening is a skill. Mary spoke about how to listen. Here are some points to keep in mind. Effective non-judgmental listeners pay attention to two main areas: verbal cues and how they are conveyed, and nonverbal cues and how they are conveyed. In fact, 70% of our communication is nonverbal. So, how do we listen non-judgmentally? Well, we allow the youth to express their thoughts uninterrupted. When appropriate, ask questions, but do not push. Use I statements to convey what you have observed. Remember, this is about the young person and not you. And use an open posture. Next, we're going to talk about a nonverbal action that can be triggering: the eye roll. So here's a note about eye rolling. We have all seen it. We have all done it. The eye roll feels disrespectful, right? However, the eye roll is really more about frustration than disrespect. So if you're like me and the eye roll is a trigger, try taking a deep breath while checking in on how you feel. Let the silence hang while you remind yourself that the eye roll is communicating frustration. Then, maybe ask the young person if they are feeling frustrated. Try to understand the frustration. The point of listening is trying to get the young person to talk. Be curious. Be brave. Don't let the eye roll throw you off your game. Next, we're going to talk about resilience. So, what is resilience? First of all, resilience is a skill, so it can be taught. Parents and caregivers teach resilience in a variety of ways. In fact, you're probably already doing it. From teaching young people simple chores like making the bed, to helping them how to regulate and identify their emotions and behaviors, to giving them the tools to use when life occasionally disappoints us or becomes really hard. Resilience, however, does not happen in a vacuum. Resilience is dependent on relationships and connections to help build three foundational skills in your young person. Those skills are capabilities, attachment and belonging, and community culture or spirituality. One of the ways we build resilience is by giving reassurance and information. When an adult gives reassurance to a young person, it may help to remove the person's fears. Statements that are clear that the young person is not alone or that their feelings are valid are helpful with building a connection and deepening a relationship. When an adult gives information, they are helping someone to understand the concepts, discuss their options, or determine that there is a sense of control that the young person can have with a situation. Information may also mean pointing out when additional help or resources are needed. When we give information and reassurance, we are encouraging resiliency. We are giving hope with facts. Now let's practice what reassurance sounds like. So here's an exercise. There's going to be a sentence that pops up on the left and then a corresponding sentence that pops up on the right. We're going to go from does not sound like to sounds like. Pay attention to the tone and the choice of words. Do you hear the difference? Our young people can. I remember my first breakup. Here's what you need to do. Breakups can be tough. It's natural for you to be hurt and upset. You really need to talk to a counselor about that. I'm here for you if you want to talk. There are also people who are trained to help you work through these feelings. You'll get over it. Just don't worry about it too much. I support you. The way you're handling this is not healthy. I care about you. I have noticed changes in your mood, your behavior. There are times when resiliency can be taught from professional help. Of course, not every young person or their family has access to these resources. Using online or virtual support specialists may be another way to access services or support. Using a church group or a mentoring organization may be a preferred route. Regardless, be open to the possibility that it may be difficult for a young person to access these services to a wide range of reasons, including stigma. Sometimes building resiliency starts within and connecting to others. Self help for young people involves the following: safety, usually within a peer group; self efficacy, which means building confidence and competence through learning a skill; and connection, friendships, and community. These are the same core values on resiliency that we talked at the beginning of the section. When thinking about self help for a young person, it may be helpful for both of you to answer these questions. Can you think of some activities that a young person you know may like to do? Can you think of some people who might provide a safe environment for your young person to explore that skill? Do you know of organizations who might be able to help? Resources. They're all the science of our youth. As you can tell, Livingston County youth may have a lot of stressors that may leave their brains vulnerable to substance misuse, or self medication, or thoughts of harm, or thoughts of suicide. This slide helps you to determine when a young person may be struggling beyond our imagining. In general, it is important for parents and caregivers to seek more help for a young person when major changes in a young person's thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. Or if you notice changes in thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that interfere with performance, relationships, or participation in usual activities. When you seek help, speak of the behaviors and what you notice. Do not try to diagnose. Ask the young person directly. For example, are you thinking about suicide? Or are you thinking about drugs? When we ask directly, we are telling the young person that we are comfortable with a tough topic. Getting a young person to an adult who can help them promotes resiliency and recovery.